So hi, welcome to End Credit Reviews. This is Tyler from End Credit Reviews.
And Stephen Lawson from the subsequently named Stephen Lawson YouTube channel.
30 years ago, Batman the Animated Series premiered on the Fox Kids Network. This would begin what is now known as the DC Animated Universe, or is now known as the Timverse, named after Bruce Timm, who is a producer and writer on many of these shows. Even though there have been other DC animated universes related to DC Comics, many of them fail to come close to the original one because they have overly basic animation, there are too many pop culture references.
Here's the plan. Green Lantern kicks Superman's ass. TMZ's got the video.
My head feels like the morning after Brixton.
It is also far more focused than the always changing DC Extended Universe, which, by the way, this is why you needed Zack Snyder in the first place.
True.
Yeah, but most of all, it is easily better than the far more popular Marvel Cinematic Universe. Many people still love the MCU, but it's no surprise that people have had a falling out with it in recent years, and many people like myself believe that the DCAU is superior in many ways. So here it is. This is why the DC Animated Universe is better than the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of course, Steven's going to chime in from time to time. So the first point I want to bring up is that it started naturally, not overly planned. When Batman the Animated Series started, and when it was made, it was meant to be its own show with isolated continuity. There were a few episodes that featured other DC characters, such as Jonah Hex in a flashback episode, and Zatanna, who was someone from Bruce Wayne's past, but nothing too distracting. Due to that show's success, Superman the Animated Series would get produced, and that show would double down on featuring other DC characters that guest star on that show, most notably the crossover with Superman and Batman teaming up. This would start a reaction to where every show after this one would greatly expand the continuity, with the whole universe was explored. What was great about this is that you gradually they let you into this universe to know Batman and his characters before showing you the rest of what DC had to offer. The problem with the MCU is that all of their movies felt overly planned out. Now, there's nothing wrong about having any sort of plan that would have helped the Star Wars sequel trilogy out a lot by Disney, but the fact that just about every one of their movies seems like an expensive ad for the next movie got tiresome after a while. Unlike the MCU, where their timeline is overly planned out and feels like they came out of a factory, the DCAU grew their timeline naturally.
Absolutely, and I guess something we harp on over and over again about Marvel and movies along those lines is how there are next to no stakes in the grand scheme of things. Even like, I would say, for me, I think one of the films to counteract that narrative the most was Infinity War. And even there, Endgame just came in like, psych! And like, ultimately just a few people ended up dead. But did they even really? Because now there's like a new timeline version of, the same character. So, I don't know. I definitely agree. I think that the DC Animated Universe did a... well, first of all, being that it was animated, some of the lack of, death and stuff and stakes was excusable for ostensibly being, a young adults to kids cartoon. But... even still, it managed to surprise us in ways, which Marvel very rarely does at this point, I think. There may be a few exceptions to that, but I definitely think that there's a lot of truth to that assessment that overall the DC Animated Universe, for not having a plan but a general idea, did tend to work out for its benefit.
All right, and that of course leads me to my second point, which is also the longest and most strongest point I have, the villains. Many would agree that at the very least, Batman the Animated Series had an amazing rogues gallery, and the same could be said for other shows in the DCAU. Aside from being iconic, Batman's villains in this show were at the very least a credible threat to Batman, and many of them were written with a touch of pathos. Some became villains because of a personal tragedy. Clayface was a disfigured actor who became addicted to a substance to hold a job, and was turned into a monster by the manufacturer's men.
I'm not an actor anymore! I'm not even a man!
The Mad Hatter was in love with his coworker, but she did not feel the same for him, causing him to forcibly take control of her mind and refusing to be stuck in the friend zone.
I've waited my whole lonely life for her!
Then all you've waited for is a puppet. A soulless little doll.
The most tragic of all was Mr. Freeze, who was trying to find a cure for his sick wife. But when his boss threatened to shut him down, he defended his wife, and within the struggle, he was kicked into chemicals. Now stuck to being inside the confines of a sub-zero temperatures and a suit, Mr. Freeze became dead inside and was driven to avenge his wife.
Think of it, Batman. To never again walk on a summer's day with a hot wind in your face and a warm hand to hold. Oh yes, I'd kill for that.
Even with the revelation that she was still alive, Mr. Freeze still hinged on the survival of his wife over his own. An almost equally tragic character was Harvey Dent, who became Two-Face. He was a good friend of Bruce Wayne's who suffered from a mental disorder and embraced it when he became disfigured. The most likable villain is Harley Quinn, who is only a villain because of her misdirected love for the Joker. She is the most realistic villain since many people have been in an abusive and unsatisfying relationship to where they are a sucker for some sort of acknowledgement or attention. It was even nice to see that some of the villains tried to reform. Some were legit, while others were just pretending so they could commit more crimes. Either way, they were tempted to become villains again to fall into their own bad habits. But some were ones who wished they could live a normal life while being held back by their own desires. Even outside of Batman, there were plenty of other interesting villains, such as Lex Luthor, who was an unholy mixture of a greedy businessman and a mad scientist, Brainiac, who cares more about his programming to obtain knowledge than the lives of other people, and Darkseid, who was an evil dictator with a god complex. By the time we got to Justice League, the Thanagarians, under the control of Hero Talek, wants to destroy Earth. The destruction of Earth was part of a weapon to win a long war they've been fighting against the Gordanians. You don't want him to win, since that would mean the destruction of Earth, but you understand his motive for making sure that his people would survive. So, how do the villains in the MCU compare? Well, even the most casual fans in the MCU would agree that the strong majority of their villains are lackluster to say the least. Many of them are overly short-sighted, and their personalities are as thin as a puddle. Sure, Loki was interesting, but most of that comes off of him being the butt end of jokes and not being a credible threat. The same could be said with Ultron, who was one of the most powerful villains in Marvel Comics, but he had too many quirks to be taken seriously and was defeated way too easily.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight...
Although the villains started to improve by Phase 3, the same recurring issue is that the MCU foolishly kills off most of the villains. Unlike the DCAU, it was rare that a villain died on screen, and they took full advantage of various villain team-ups. The best was the formation of Legion of Doom in the final season of Justice League Unlimited, and was satisfying to see their interactions, and eventually a mini Civil War breaking out, which, by the way, is how you do it for real Civil War.
Get wrecked.
On top of that, they even teamed up with the Justice League at the end to fight Darkseid's invasion. Having any sort of big villain team-up is something that the MCU has still yet to do, and while they have hinted at that at least once of that with the Vulture and Scorpion at the end of Spider-Man Homecoming, it is a golden opportunity they keep missing out on. Many would say that Thanos is the best villain in the MCU. I agree, but let's compare him to another character with a similar story. Okay, so Thanos is more similar to Darkseid, but his journey reminds me more of Vandal Savage. Both these characters desire ultimate power, and they achieve their goals with being a rare moment of the villain winning, but this is where they split. Vandal Savage had years to think about all the bad things he did, and concludes that he was wrong.
Like the rocket ship, I suppose.
Starship. I'd intended to leave the Earth and search the universe for other life, but I never did.
Too difficult?
Not at all. I decided I deserved to be punished.
He even sends Superman back in time to stop him from succeeding, even if it means that he'll no longer live. The sacrifice and character arc that he goes through is satisfying on many levels. Thanos does have some time to reflect on his decision, but he gets killed off shortly after, and the movie brings back a version of Thanos who is just a mustache-twirling villain. Both characters ironically fade from existence, but one was clearly better written.
Yeah, in complete agreement with all of that. We went over a lot there, so I'll just try to pause on a couple notable things.
Sure thing.
I definitely was going to draw attention, if you hadn't mentioned, to... I was definitely going to draw attention to...
Not that.
Yeah, not the fact that I dropped my phone like an idiot, but Lex Luthor was a phenomenal villain from the Superman gallery, Rogues gallery, and Brainiac and Darkseid. So you brought all of them up, and I think they're very much worth mentioning, as well as obviously Harley Quinn for a variety of reasons. And yeah, the MCU villains, I don't think many people, if any, would... sure, some people may argue, oh, Killmonger, because, they like Black Panther or something like that. But still, end of the day, especially in Phase 4 that they are in right now, there is a real lack of oomph. It seems like they've hit the highest point because it was all building up to Thanos in Infinity War specifically, not Endgame. Endgame was almost and now we have to do the safe thing to make everyone feel better, which was, of course, back to Marvel as usual.
And Disney.
And Disney, yes. Meanwhile, the DCEU was able to do a lot of different meaningful character arcs and character studies. The Batman Rogues Gallery is obviously especially good for this and has been commented on as such for quite some time. Don't mind that, just some shooting outside or something.
it's fireworks. We're recording this on 4th of July
weekend. It's the 4th of July, yeah.
It's Michael Bay's favorite time of the year.
That's right. The most American celebration. But, yeah, no, I definitely agree. I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything else, but...
Not exactly. I'll bring up some other stuff later on, but... So the third point I want to bring up is the variety. The DCAU had an ever-changing design. Batman the Animated Series started with the look of the Superman cartoons in the 1940s, but then it got more of a simple look to save on money spent on animation. This would get better throughout time, and would even peak in quality by Justice League embracing the inking on characters used by Bruce Timm's illustrations. Outside of visual style, Batman the Animated Series treated every episode like it was a short film. Batman Beyond captured a team crime-fighting drama, which was something also Stack Shock did, but not as well. Superman the Animated Series captured the fun escapism of imagining being a powerful figure. The Zeta Project showed a character who was being hunted and wanted to be left alone, similar to the Bourne series with Matt Damon. And both Justice League and Justice League Unlimited capture the great character interactions and teamwork of overcoming various obstacles. This is something that the MCU does not have. Outside a handful of movies, the MCU, for the most part, lacks any sort of inspired visual style, with all their movies feeling and looking the same. Unlike the DCAU, that is enriched with many beautiful and expressive colors, the MCU looks overly flat for such big-budget movies. The most annoying aspect is the fact they keep forcing too many jokes in their movies. I'm not exaggerating that these movies cannot go more than an average of 5 minutes without cracking a joke, and it seems that the frequency of these jokes get higher with every new phase. There are many jokes in the DCAU, but they never took away from the serious and mature moments.
I object to this witness. She's obviously trying to influence the judge.
What makes you say that?
Never mind.
What are you doing tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinky.
What?
Never mind.
Come on, he must be a zillion years old. What trouble could an old geezer... Never mind.
Fastest man alive.
Which might explain why you can't get a date.
Yeah. Hey!
I hear she's, Brazilian.
Ha ha.
One feels forced and man-made, while the other one feels more natural without compromising the tone of the story.
Does anyone have any orange slices?
What are those? You can't just leave like that. The whole world is going crazy. All the stuff we saw is spreading.
Why was she up there all this time?
One of the more disappointing things about the MCU is its music. Aside from the catchy Avengers theme that is consistent, the average person cannot hum the music themes, let's say Iron Man or Thor or even Captain America. Virtually everyone knows that shows from the DCAU is memorable to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Yeah, I don't know what else needs to even be said on that. It's pretty self-explanatory. I guess I didn't mention, though, you mentioned the villain team-ups that are in the DCAU, and that definitely does warrant some emphasis, because that, I would say the DCEU currently has tried that, and it still hasn't gotten nearly to the same effect. It's kind of been the hot topic version of what the DCAU accomplished, but I have always preferred DC's, and especially the DCAU's version of handling humor. It is clear that Marvel is just it is obligated to do cringe humor every once in a while, and by once in a while I mean every breath. That is an unfortunate quality that I think people are, even who originally really liked the MCU, have caught on to, and may start to get jaded to over time. Also mentioning, talking about how there's so much range and tone and color in the DCAU. I think that it has accomplished more than any other like superhero show or franchise or capacity. That's including things like Invincible and The Boys and things like that that currently exist on Amazon or things like that. Justice League, the DCAU, did a really good job of matching tones of dark and light and just balancing it all in in scenes and tones for characters that is believable, and it made the world seem rich and real in a way that even though they were cartoons, it made sense and it lended authenticity to that universe in a way that was very we could just live and breathe in it. So I definitely agree, and one of our friends has often commented about how the DCEU can use a bit more of that, and I agree. I think, well, I was going to say I think that they're on that track, but recently I think they've been a little more just screw it, let's Marvelize, which is unfortunate. But I definitely think that there is room to grow for both DC and Marvel in that direction, especially in their live action series.
All right. So the next point I want to make is showing the shady side of government. One of the best movies in the MCU was Captain America the Winter Soldier because it shows the dark side of government. The issue with this is that the MCU quickly resolves this and it never gets brought back up ever again for the most part. In the DCAU, they started off to show the shady side of government when Superman discovers that an alphabet agency was forcing Volcana to be their own weapon. This was better expanded upon in the Justice League Unlimited with the creation of Cadmus that was headed by Amanda Waller. The fact that they team up with shady characters to achieve their goals reflects on the American government's questionable things they've done in the past for quote-unquote national security or quote-unquote the greater good. Amanda's concerns are somewhat reasonable since America was unprepared for the Thanagarian invasion.
If we present a threat, you've got a spaceship floating over our heads with a laser weapon pointing down.
What also fuels her concern is knowing that in an alternate reality that the Justice League, aka the Justice Lords, become evil, Superman murdering the President of the United States, Lex Luthor, and him alongside the rest of the Justice Lords setting up a totalitarian government. Something like this in alternate reality storytelling is shown in the MCU show What If, but the problem is that that show lacks any creative substance and comes off more as content to fill a streaming service. So overall, seeing Batman fight and argue with a version of himself is far better written than a similar story version where Captain America fights a version of himself just to crack a crude joke at the end after he wins.
You grabbed power, and with that power, we've made a world where no 8-year-old boy will ever lose his parents because of some punk with a gun.
That is America's ass.
One of my favorite story arcs is when Lex Luthor has an alliance with Amanda Waller just to play her. He also manipulates members of the Justice League into fear, doubt, and paranoia when he runs for President of the United States, but he only did this in a Machiavellian way to manipulate these people to try to come off on top.
Yeah, no, I agree. How government is depicted in superhero media in general, and that includes everything we've talked about so far, the DCAU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe especially. I don't even know how to quite summarize it more than, like, there are very liberal answers and clear philosophies in their assessments of things like, oh, there's a problem in the government. Oh, it's just a few bad apples, and we'll get rid of them, and everything's fine again. Maybe the whole tree was the problem, you know? Like, and obviously being agents of force and stuff like that, as superheroes, they basically have an unequal amount of force that can be used, which would be a threat to the government. It's interesting to see how these different franchises handle it. I will say one of the weird strengths, I would say, of the MCU in a weird way is that they kind of just go without saying, yeah, because the government is terrible and in the way it is, it's more than likely the Avengers would just be on government payroll or something like that, you know? And that's something that, like, The Boys captures very well as well. This sort of just, like, deeply cynical look at what superpowers actually mean. And the DCAU, I would say, there's always been something different about DC, and I think the best way I've heard it put is like that DC is about basically gods, respectively, living amongst men. And Marvel is more about men trying to be gods but failing. You know, you can choose however you want it, but there's always been something more esoteric about just the Justice League and DC, where it's just like, it's more about value judgment and a higher purpose that is harder to put your finger on. So I don't necessarily know if that's better than the way Marvel has done it. I definitely think that with the example of Amanda Waller, she's a good example of how bad stuff can get in the name of national security and stuff like that, where things like freaking Civil War just utterly diarrheaed their pants over, you know, just like, oh, Wanda failed to make an explosion be completely contained in Africa, so you know, just no, that's dumb and bad. But I do think that overall, for better or for worse, the DC EU and AU have at least done a better job in terms of consequences of actions of those with superpowers, along with The Boys and Invincible. They've all done a good job of showing the true cost of what it would mean to have superpowered individuals and what the government would even be capable of or try to do in that situation.
So the next point I want to make is that they had natural relationships. There were no shortage of relationships in the DCAU. Superman stuck with Lois Lane, and the Terry McGinnis Batman mainly had Dana, but there were many characters who had more than just one throughout their shows. Batman, aka Bruce Wayne, technically did have a superpower, and that was managing to get to first base, so much that he would eventually hook up with Batgirl, but even Barbara Gordon knew that wasn't meant to last.
On the street, it was like ballet. We were the perfect duo. But for Bruce, Batman, there was nothing but the street.
The MCU does have relationships, but they're pretty average in terms of quality and sometimes comes off as awkward. Remember when Captain America hooks up with Agent Carter at the end? Well, did he also tell her that he also made out with her future niece? Even more forced was the relationship between Bruce Banner and Natasha Romanoff. These two actors had zero chemistry, and their characters that they play had next to no sexual tension in the previous movie or in this one. At least they were wise enough to abandon this in future movies, but fails compared to a similar one in the DCAU. Green Lantern and Hawkgirl became a couple made sense because they're both warriors. Jon Stewart served in the Marine Corps, and Shire Hall comes from an alien race of fighters. They also share each other's headstrong personality, where the second time you watch it makes more sense that they felt for something for one another.
That's not true. I care.
You don't care about me.
What are you talking about? I'd give my life for you.
When they do confess their love, it is satisfying to say the least. So when they do break up, it's heart-wrenching and even awkward when he gets a new girlfriend. On top of that, when he goes to the future, he meets someone special, which was, Hawkman. And he's like, Zach, what's going on? And Hawkman sees Green Lantern and says, Dad? And the look on Green Lantern's face is like he just found out he was a father on Maury or something. Alright, so what are your thoughts on that, Steven?
Yeah, also, while on the topic of weird relationships that didn't work in the MCU and stuff like that, let's stop to talk about the vibrator in the room being Vision and Wanda.
I'm getting to her soon.
Okay, I was gonna say that was so weird, and not to spoil, but bringing it into the new Doctor Strange movie, how important she was in her instability breakdown that happened. It's just, that, and especially Black Widow and the Hulk, it just seemed like, wait, what? Like, we're just supposed to buy this,
Just so Joss Whedon can have a shot of, an actor landing on the actress's boobs like he did with Ezra Miller on Gal Gadot on Justice League, because he, in actuality, is just a perv and just a feminist in name only.
Yeah, he really just wanted to do the animated, or he wanted to do a CG sex scene where the Hulk hulks out and is putting his giant green zucchini on freaking Scarlett Johansson. Bring a whole new meaning to Smash, but on the subject, the DCAU has a lot more believable relationships. I don't think there's a lot that needs to be said about it, but they handle nuance a hell of a lot better. That's for one, and not even the romantic relationships, which are, kind of, I guess, what we're focusing on, but there's even less romantic, and I often think of, I think it was in Justice League, just how precious the moment with, there was a girl who was going to die.
Oh yeah, Ace?
Yeah, Ace, and Batman just sits with her on the swing because he can't do anything else, but that literally made me tear up. I mean, that is just such a human moment in that series that Marvel has never come close to achieving at all. Like, in their extra shows, in their movies, whatever, just hasn't happened.
Yeah, it's really great stuff, but I'm going to bring back WandaVision that pretty soon, so let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Next point is that there is a better passing of the baton. It's no secret going forward that the MCU is going to be more female-focused. There are characters that have been written out to make more room for more female characters. Most notably, the new Black Panther movie will have a woman now as the title character. Making another one of these movies without T'Challa coming back because the actor who played him tragically died years ago is just bad taste. We have had some characters who are trying to be copies of past characters become new versions of them, but they pale comparison to Terry McGinnis, who became the next Batman. I know in the Hawkeye show, we had like Haley Steinfeld's character wants to be the new Hawkeye or whatever it is, and with her characters like, oh, I'm all, I'm just a fan or whatever, stuff like that. But the thing is that Terry McGinnis was far better written as a character, and why he deserved more as be a character who was iconic at the very least. So the thing is that these characters may have some sort of tragic backstory, but compared to Terry McGinnis, we sympathize with him a lot more. Because the thing is that Terry McGinnis was a high school kid with a bad temper who came from a broken home, spent time in juvie, and because he decided to run out to party, his father was killed in a home invasion. Even though he would find out later that it wasn't his real father, and his real father was Bruce Wayne, that guilt that he felt is still valid, and that moment where he pretty much cries to his mom after his dad's funeral and says how much guilty he feels really does hit you like an emotional ton of bricks.
I yelled at him, Mom. He grounded me and I wouldn't listen. The things I said. I'm such a jerk.
Throughout the series, he learned how to become Batman to where he felt like he earned the title, and not just by filling in a quota.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what more needs to even be said on the subject? But it's very true. That's moments like that are just allowed, given a lot more room to breathe, and make richer characters in the DCAU. So, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Before we start, something that just occurred to me: how are they gonna write out T'Challa in the movies? Are they just going to be like, oh yeah, he died of ass cancer? Like,
oh no!
Despite all of our superior, amazing future Afro technology, he died of poo-poo cancer.
You should have learned the warnings of that one pastor in Africa: eat the poo-poo.
Eat the poo-poo. Do you accept eating poo-poo? But anyways.
All right, maybe that's what Killmonger is trying to do, is put him out of his misery.
Is this your so-called king? King of poo-poo eaters?
Yeah, I feel like his acting was like over the top in that movie.
It definitely had its moments. He was a very loud character, I guess you could say. But shots fired! Shots fired!
The Shining purpose.
It was. Yeah.
Oh, they laughed this hard since we watched Twilight and the pilgrim suits.
We're gonna get speared any second now.
Oh, I don't know if you've seen the new. Speaking of, I don't know if you saw the new Stranger Things. So there's a moment where the characters are trying to make weapons in that, and guess who the two black characters are doing?
Stop!
They're making
saw
spears.
That. Yes. Oh my lord!
I was laughing pretty hard. Like, oh my, this is like the Last Jedi when they had an Asian character do the kamikaze bombing.
That still kills me every freaking time. Oh my lord! And the irony of that movie too, like trying to be more woke and stuff, and it just starts with a kamikaze pilot.
It's like the Marvel Comics is like, oh, what if Miles Teller was Thor? What would Asgard be like? It'd be like the ghetto Harlem.
Yeah, like we see in the new Thor movie with I'm forgetting her name, but the Valkyrie, basically in charge of
Tessa Thompson's character.
Yeah. So now he returns and they all have big gold chains and grills or something over the top like that. That would be so insane. Like if they, yeah. Anyways, probably should stop talking before I get in trouble.
The Marlon Wayans production. Okay, back to this. Okay. So next point I want to bring in. Alright, so next point is not selfish, what you were saying earlier about, WandaVision and the new Doctor Strange movie. So this is kind of a mild spoiler here, so here it is. One of the ways that shows a cultural shift in storytelling is comparing and contrasting the two-part story Legends and the whole run of WandaVision. In Legends, some of the Justice League is teleported to a parallel world where in the comic books that Jon Stewart read as a kid exist. But then it turns out that these heroes died years ago, and a kid named Ray Thompson, who was mutated by the fallout of nuclear weapons, is forcing the survivors to live out his fantasies. In WandaVision, she uses her powers to construct an ideal life, but holding a bunch of people hostage and force them to go along with her delusion. The way that Ray is shown to be in the wrong for doing what he did by forcing innocent people to go along with his fantasies of him being the villain and being selfish. However, in WandaVision, the show tries to convince the audience that she's still in the right because her emotions said so. I'm worried that this foreshadowed what she would do in the new Doctor Strange movie, but it's sad to see how within less than 20 years how the views had changed for the worst, because while the MCU has gone for more moral ambiguity, it's nice to know that DCAU stuck with its morals and principles.
Yeah, I completely agree. And especially in the case of Wanda, it's stunning to me how many defenders there are of her at this point.
Because they sim for Elizabeth Olsen, let's face it.
Well, I think that's a large part of it, but there's also a lot of girls, women, that they clearly empathize with her and project themselves in her, and it's like, no, this is a case study in why that's wrong, that's bad, and you should not want that. But I don't know.
Alright, so next up is that it did not feel a need to lecture the audience. What I appreciate about the DCAU in retrospect is that it did not feel a need to lecture their audience how to live their lives. Sure, there were a few moments where Batman and or Superman were telling kids how to be safe, but these type of PSA-style moments were common in the 1990s.
You play chicken long enough, you fry.
Look at the way these monsters are turned into heroes. It all starts with the permissive liberal media.
Well, he's got a point about that liberal media. Aside from that, the creators of the show knew that their job was to entertain the audience, not to lecture them.
We don't play favorites, we don't sell deodorant on television, and we don't get involved in politics.
Sadly, this is where the MCU has suffered. I'm aware that the world was different in the 2000s when Justice League Unlimited was on the air, but that is why I value it more nowadays. It's nice to escape from the real world, while the MCU feels a need in recent years to overly remind you of it. Most notably the Falcon Winter Soldier episode where it's like, you gotta do better, you know, or do better, or whatever.
Yeah, that was such a wacky resolution to the whole thing. Is just like lecturing the corrupt politician. You gotta do better. That reminds me in real life of like how Hillary Clinton basically, when confronted on basically needing to crack down on Wall Street, she said, and I went down to Wall Street and said, cut it out. And it's like, okay, no one believes you, and that was literally Sam energy in that scene of just like, you got to do better, Senator. Like, okay. That's not a real addressal of it at all, and that's as much as Marvel is capable of.
Meanwhile, Goldman Sachs is popping another quart of champagne.
Yeah, exactly. But no, I agree that the DCAU is a product of its time, and while there's probably less overtly political stuff, for better or worse, depending on your perspective, I think it did a good job of having a very core moral tone that was consistent, and I don't think you can really say that for Marvel, like, at all. It's kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm. And the final point I want to bring up is that it knew when to quit. Well, mostly. It's clear that the MCU should have ended with Avengers Endgame, but because Disney won't let this franchise die, they'll be milking it as much as possible because the MCU now has really no direction. Unlike some shows that continued onward far past their prime to become a shadow of their former selves, like The Simpsons and Family Guy, the DCAU knew when to end and not to go on for too long. Well, for the most part. In recent years, there have been comics to sort of extend the continuity of the DCAU, and I have to admit that many of these stories are pointless and they're just to cash in nostalgia. This is something that has jumped up in the 2010s and has grown quite tiresome. This is why I haven't read much of these, because they're just for corporate reasons and then artistic merits. As a whole, the DCAU has hundreds of episodes to go along with to indulge in. That is also not including the various movies, video games, books, and many more comic book tie-ins. And while not all of them were worth watching more than once, the great stuff easily outweighs that, and is far more than what I can say about the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, I would completely agree. It is increasingly rare that franchises or media will be able to gracefully bow out and decide for themselves, this is done, we're moving on to something else, because of the, talking about political issues, incredible just corporatized consolidation of media and pretty much everything. That isn't an option for a lot of these people. And so I completely agree with you that where many things should die, they will be turned into zombies of the nth degree just for the sake of a few more bucks. And that's overall pretty sad. I haven't seen, I don't think, as much of the more contemporary DCAU contributions that you've been talking about, but I know things like Young Justice, were they a part of that?
No, it's their own separate continuity.
Okay. Well, that sort of thing I guess I understand, but don't necessarily have a problem with. But I definitely agree that it's pretty clear from what we've seen tonally, in terms of character study, depth, stuff like that, the DCAU is a superior product to the MCU, aside from everything but maybe just the amount of pure money poured into it. But money does not equal quality, as has been proven. And I would say, along those lines, if you want to see good hero media, I think Invincible is pretty good from Amazon. The Boys is decent, but that's kind of in a more darker direction. But overall, I think, talking about superheroes and stuff for the nth time, I think Tyler and I would both agree it's time for something else. You know, like, while it's good to have this stuff around, it's clear that the voices in Disney and Warner Brothers and places like that, ultimately they're going to milk this until no one wants it anymore and beyond that, because they won't get the word until it's way too late. And so the true solution is long-term to contribute something new, to find the next new thing, and hopefully not milk that endlessly too. But, you know, realistically, that is a risk. And so I would just say that if you haven't given the DCAU a chance, definitely look back on it. It is worth your time. It is a tremendously valuable piece of animated history. And I definitely agree with the assessment that it is a superior craft to the MCU, but long term, hopefully we will find the next genre, the next road, the next route to a artistic field that has not yet been explored.
All right, that's pretty awesome, right? What you're saying as an epilogue to this video. So anyway, this is Tyler from Anchor Reviews.
And Stephen Lawson from the subsequently named YouTube channel.
All right, hope you enjoyed this video of ours, and I hope to make a lot more like this in the future. Please like and subscribe.